In the heart of a small, busy town, the streets often went unnoticed by the people who walked on them. The sidewalks, worn from years of use, were cracked in some places, and the gutters had collected trash from passing cars. Most residents hurried by, not paying much attention to the state of the streets around them. The town was a place where people's lives moved quickly, and the condition of the neighborhood didn't seem to matter to anyone, except for one person, Emily. Emily was a young girl who came from a family that didn't have much. Her worn-out clothes and scuffed shoes were a constant reminder of how hard her family worked just to get by. Yet, Emily had a heart that was far bigger than the little house she lived in. Every day, without fail, she could be seen on the sidewalks, sweeping away the litter that had been carelessly tossed aside. She wasn't asked to do it, and no one paid her to do it. But Emily did it anyway, because she believed the streets deserved better. She believed her neighborhood deserved better. Most of the people in the town couldn't understand why Emily spent so much time sweeping the streets. They thought she was wasting her energy, that there were better ways she could be using her time. Some even mocked her efforts, laughing behind her back as she worked. Why bother, they'd say? The streets will get dirty again tomorrow. But Emily didn't mind. She had heard their comments before, and though they stung, they didn't stop her. She knew the streets could be cleaner, and that was enough for her. As Emily swept the sidewalks, she didn't expect anyone to praise her or thank her. She simply wanted to make the world around her a little better. She hoped that someday people would notice her efforts, but for now, she was content with just doing the right thing, even if no one else understood. Her quiet determination was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can be the most powerful, even if they go unnoticed at first. Emily was just a girl with a broom, but in her heart she was already a hero. Every morning Emily woke up before the sun, grabbed her old broom and went outside to clean the streets. The world was still sleepy, and the air was cool against her skin. She loved this time of day, the silence, the solitude, the feeling that she was the only one awake in a world that hadn't yet started rushing. But even in this quiet, there was something she couldn't escape: the mocking. As Emily began sweeping the dirt and litter from the sidewalks, she could hear the whispers and the laughter behind her. The older kids who passed by on their way to school would snicker and make jokes. "Here she goes again," one of them would say. "Why doesn't she just stay home and clean her own house?" Others would chime in with sarcastic remarks. "What's she trying to do? Save the whole town with a broom?" They laughed as they walked past, their voices filled with mockery. At first it bothered Emily. It stung, especially when it came from the older kids in her class, kids who should have known better. It was hard not to feel small when they made fun of her so openly. But Emily had learned to ignore them, at least most of the time. The teasing was part of her routine, just like the sweeping. It was something she had come to expect. Some days when the laughter was especially loud, Emily would pause for a moment and stare at the ground, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She wished that just once someone would see her for the effort she was putting in, or for the reason behind her actions. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She just wanted her town to look nice, to feel proud of the place they lived in. She wished the mocking would stop, but she knew it wasn't likely. People were too busy with their own lives to care about what she was doing. Her family was no different. Her mother never said much about Emily's cleaning, except for the occasional "good job, dear." But her father often grumbled. "Why don't you help with something useful?" he'd ask. "That street will be dirty again in no time. Spend your time on something that matters." His words felt heavy, like they were adding to the weight of all the teasing she already had to carry. Still, Emily didn't let their words stop her. She knew they didn't understand. In their eyes, what she was doing was just a pointless task, but in her heart she believed that every little bit mattered, no matter how small. The mocking would sting, yes, but it wouldn't be enough to make her give up. As long as she had the broom in her hand, she would keep going. One bright and crisp morning, as Emily was sweeping the fallen leaves from the curb, she could already hear the familiar voices approaching. The older kids, always in a rush to get to school, walked past her talking loudly. Emily didn't look up, pretending she didn't hear them, but she knew what was coming. "Guess who's out here again, playing street cleaner?" one of them called out with a laugh. Another added, "What's the point? The leaves will be back tomorrow." The laughter grew louder as they passed, and Emily felt the sting of their words. It was hard not to let the hurt show, but she focused on her broom, sweeping in smooth, even strokes. Her hands moved with a practiced rhythm, the way they always did. The quiet repetition of the motion helped calm the aching in her chest, and soon she found herself lost in the task. Maybe it was silly, but there was something comforting about making the street look a little cleaner, even if no one else cared. As she worked, she noticed a few pieces of paper and plastic blowing toward her, caught in the wind. It was a reminder of how much work there was still left to do. But as she bent down to pick them up, something strange happened. Instead of hearing more laughter or sarcastic comments, the voices of the kids grew quieter. Curious, Emily glanced up just in time to see a large car passing by, slowing down as it neared her. The car was shiny and clean, and she couldn't help but notice the person sitting in the front seat, a man in a suit with a stern face, holding the wheel tightly. It was the mayor. He was the one person in the town who always seemed to be in a hurry, rushing from one meeting to another. Emily had never spoken to him, but she had seen him around, and everyone knew who he was. Most people didn't think much of him either, but she had always wondered why he never stopped to look at the town the way she did. The car slowed to a stop right in front of her, and Emily froze. She wasn't sure what to do, whether to wave or just keep sweeping. She stood up straighter, trying to look confident, but her heart started beating a little faster. The mayor rolled down his window slowly, and for a moment they just stared at each other. "You're always out here, aren't you?" he said, his voice calm but full of curiosity. Emily nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, sir, I want the streets to look nicer." The mayor looked at her for a moment longer, then glanced around at the town. His eyes lingered on the trash and the littered sidewalks. Emily wasn't sure what he was thinking, but for the first time she saw a flicker of something in his gaze, something other than the usual indifference. "You're doing a good job," the mayor said, before rolling up his window and driving off, his car disappearing down the street. Emily stood there for a moment, feeling a strange warmth spread through her. It wasn't much, just a few words, but it felt like a small victory. As the mayor's car faded into the distance, Emily couldn't help but smile to herself. Maybe the world wasn't as indifferent as she thought. Maybe, just maybe, someone had noticed her work. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy. Emily continued her routine, sweeping the streets each morning before school, not expecting anything to change. The teasing had faded into the background of her life, something she had grown used to. Even though the mayor's brief conversation lingered in her mind, she pushed it aside, telling herself it didn't mean much. After all, he had only spoken a few kind words, words that didn't change the reality of her situation. People still mocked her and the streets still got dirty, but one afternoon, something happened that Emily hadn't expected. It was a Tuesday, the middle of the week, when Emily was out on her usual route, sweeping up paper cups and candy wrappers from the gutter. The wind was picking up, and she was working quickly to finish before the next round of teasing arrived. Just as she reached the corner of her street, a car pulled up beside her. Emily didn't even look up, thinking it was just another passerby. But when the car's door opened and a voice called out her name, she froze. "Emily." She looked up and blinked, surprised to see the mayor standing outside his car, smiling warmly at her. "Hi, I didn't expect to see you again," she stammered, unsure of what to say. The mayor chuckled, his voice kind but firm. "I've been thinking about what you've been doing here. You know, it's not every day you see someone so dedicated to making their neighborhood better." Emily felt her cheeks warm, not sure whether to feel embarrassed or proud. I just want it to look nice. That's all." The mayor nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that, and I think it's something worth recognizing." He paused for a moment, glancing around at the clean stretch of sidewalk where Emily had just finished sweeping. "You've been working so hard, and I don't think anyone's really noticed, so I want to make sure you're recognized for it." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The mayor smiled again, pulling a small envelope from his jacket pocket. "I'm going to announce something tomorrow at the town hall meeting. I want to give you a special recognition for all your hard work. You deserve it." Emily stared at him in disbelief. Recognition? For cleaning the streets? She had never imagined that something as small as sweeping could lead to anything like this. But I'm just doing what I think is right, she said softly, feeling a rush of emotions. I don't need anything special. The mayor's expression softened. You don't have to need it, Emily. But you've earned it. And sometimes people need to be reminded of the heroes in their midst, even if those heroes are sweeping the streets. With that, he got back in his car and drove off, leaving Emily standing on the corner, her heart racing. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what had just happened. The teasing, the laughter, the indifference, it had all seemed like it would last forever. But now, for the first time, she felt as if she were being seen, truly seen, for what she was doing. The next day, word spread quickly through the town. Emily could hardly believe it when she walked into school and saw the whispers passing between her classmates. The teasing had stopped, replaced with curiosity. Everyone was talking about the mayor's announcement, about the girl who had been cleaning the streets and was about to be recognized for it. Emily felt a mix of emotions. She was nervous, yes, but there was also a flicker of pride in her chest, and she couldn't help but feel a small glimmer of hope. Maybe the streets were about to get even cleaner, not just because of her broom, but because her town was finally starting to see what she had been doing all along. The moment of recognition was coming, and it was about to change everything. The following day, the town hall was packed. The usual hustle and bustle of town meetings felt different this time, as the room buzzed with curious energy. Whispers filled the air, and every chair seemed occupied, all eyes on the front where the mayor stood at a podium, preparing for his speech. Emily stood near the back, feeling like a small speck in the crowd. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her palms felt sweaty. She had never been in the spotlight before, and even though she had been given this recognition, it felt overwhelming. She glanced around the room, seeing faces she knew from school, neighbors she passed by every day, and a few strangers. Everyone was looking at her, but none of them had ever truly seen her before, not like this. The mayor finally stepped up to the podium, his voice commanding the room's attention. Thank you all for being here today. I have an important announcement to make about someone who has shown exceptional dedication to our community. Someone who, despite the teasing and the laughter, has quietly worked to make our town a better place. Emily felt her cheeks flush. She tried to shrink into herself, wishing the attention would go away. But she knew it was no use. Many of you know her, the mayor continued, his eyes scanning the room. She's the one you've seen sweeping the streets every morning. She doesn't ask for recognition. She just does what she believes is right. The mayor looked directly at Emily, and though she felt nervous, she forced herself to meet his gaze. She couldn't help but notice how the room seemed to fall silent, all eyes now focused on her. It felt strange, yet somehow comforting, like the weight of all the teasing she had endured was being lifted. The girl who has taken it upon herself to make our streets cleaner and our town a better place, the mayor said, his voice filled with pride. I'm pleased to announce that today, we recognize her with the Mayor's Medal of Community Service. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by a few gasps and murmurs of surprise. Emily stood frozen, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Her eyes widened as the mayor walked toward her, holding out a small shiny medal. It caught the light, gleaming in the afternoon sun, that streamed through the hall's windows. She blinked, unsure of what to do next. Emily, the mayor said, his voice softer now, you've shown what it means to be a true hero. Not because you have a cape or a spotlight, but because you've done something kind, day after day, with no expectation of reward. Your actions have made a difference. The room erupted into applause. At first, Emily didn't know how to respond. She was overwhelmed, her heart racing with emotions she didn't know how to put into words. All she had ever wanted was for someone to notice her, to understand why she cleaned the streets, and now here she was, standing in front of the entire town, receiving a medal for something she never imagined could lead to such recognition. The mayor placed the medal around her neck, and Emily's hands trembled as she touched it, feeling the weight of it. For a moment everything seemed to slow down. The applause continued, but it wasn't just noise anymore. It felt like a warm embrace, like the town was finally acknowledging her efforts. Finally they saw her. Thank you, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible, but filled with sincerity. She couldn't believe she had the words to express the gratitude that swelled inside her. But there was something else, too. Something deeper. The mayor stepped back, allowing Emily to have her moment. As the applause grew louder, she felt something shift within her. The mockery that had followed her for so long faded into the background, replaced by a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had done it. She had made a difference, even when no one believed in her. And now the people who had once mocked her were standing in front of her, clapping and smiling, their faces filled with respect. The very kids who had laughed at her before were now looking at her with admiration. For the first time, Emily didn't feel like an outsider. She didn't feel like the girl who was wasting her time sweeping the streets. She felt like part of something bigger. She felt like a hero, not because of the medal, but because she had stuck to her convictions, and in doing so had inspired others to do the same. The mayor finished his speech, and the crowd began to disperse. People came up to Emily to shake her hand, or pat her on the back. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. The teasing was gone, replaced by kindness and gratitude. Emily realized that the town was changing, not just because of her actions, but because they had finally seen what was truly important. As she stood there, holding her medal close, Emily couldn't help but smile. She had started this journey alone, armed only with a broom and a desire to make her world a better place. Now she wasn't alone anymore. She had the support of her community, and the streets that had once been a source of mockery were now a symbol of pride. It wasn't just about the recognition anymore. It was about the impact she had made, not only on her town, but on herself. She had found her voice, and with that voice, she had created a change that would last long after the applause had faded. The days following the ceremony were filled with a whirlwind of activity. Emily felt like she was living in a dream. People waved at her on the street, and some even stopped to thank her for cleaning up the neighborhood. The teasing had completely stopped, and the town felt different, kinder, more aware of its surroundings. What had once been ignored, or even mocked, had become something everyone seemed to value now. At school things were different too. Her classmates who had once called her names and laughed at her efforts now looked at her with a newfound respect. Even the boys who had made the most jokes about her broom were suddenly offering to help. One afternoon, as she was sweeping by the park, a group of them came over with trash bags, ready to pitch in. "Hey Emily," one of them said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "We thought we could help out today. You know, with all the stuff you've been doing around here." Emily looked at them, her heart swelling with both surprise and gratitude. She hadn't expected this, but it felt right, like the change in the town was starting to sink in for everyone, not just her. She smiled, glad to have the extra hands. "Thanks," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I really appreciate it." They worked together, collecting trash from the park and the nearby streets, laughing as they did. Emily had never imagined that one day the same people who mocked her would be the ones standing by her side, cleaning up the place they all shared. It felt good, really good, to know that her small act of cleaning up had sparked something bigger in the town. It wasn't just about the streets anymore. It was about community, about coming together for something greater than themselves. Her father, who had always been skeptical about Emily's efforts, was the next to change. One evening, as Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, she noticed him looking at the medal that still hung around her neck. He stared at it for a moment before turning to her. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking, maybe I was wrong about what you were doing." Emily looked up, surprised by his words. "What do you mean?" "I've been so focused on what I thought was important, work, money, surviving, that I didn't see how much this meant to you." "And how much it meant to the town," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you, Emily, you did something real." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She had never heard her father say anything like that before, and it made all the teasing, the doubts, and the hard days worth it. She knew he loved her, but hearing him say he was proud was something she'd never expected. "I didn't do it for the medal," she said softly, touching it gently. "I did it because I wanted to make the place I live in better. And maybe that's enough." Her mother, who had always been supportive, simply smiled from across the room, her eyes filled with pride. "You've always had a big heart, Emily," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "And now the town is seeing it too." Over the next few weeks, more and more people joined Emily in her mission to clean the streets. It wasn't just the kids anymore. Entire families, neighbors, even local businesses began to get involved. Some started organizing community cleanup events, while others put up signs encouraging everyone to take pride in their town. The streets that had once been filled with litter were now pristine, and the air felt different. People smiled more. They spoke to each other more. There was a sense of pride in the air, a shared responsibility for making their home a place they could be proud of. But for Emily, the real reward wasn't the recognition or the change in the town. It was in the feeling she got every morning when she picked up her broom, knowing that even the smallest actions could lead to something bigger. She didn't need applause. She didn't need a medal. She had learned that real change came from within, and that sometimes doing the right thing was enough, even if no one was watching. One morning, as she stood on the corner of her street, the sun rising in the distance, she looked around and smiled. The streets were clean, the people were kinder, and her heart felt full. She hadn't just cleaned the town, she had helped to clean the hearts of the people who lived there too. Emily had proven something important, that no act of kindness, no matter how small, ever goes unnoticed. And sometimes all it takes is one person to show the world that the little things can make the biggest difference. As she continued to sweep, her eyes fell on the medal that hung from her neck, catching the light of the rising sun. She smiled knowing that, while it was nice to be recognized, the true reward had been the journey itself. In the end, Emily knew that heroism wasn't about grand gestures or fame. It was about doing the right thing, even when no one was watching, and that was enough. Weeks passed, and the town continued to thrive with a renewed sense of community spirit. Emily's morning ritual of sweeping the streets had become more than just a solitary task, it had become a shared responsibility, a reflection of the change that was sweeping through the town. People who once ignored the state of their streets were now proud to participate in keeping them clean. The pride in the air was palpable, and Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment, even as the town's focus shifted to new community projects. The town hall meetings, which had once been filled with talk of budgets and zoning laws, were now increasingly about how to maintain the positive changes they had made. The mayor, who had once seemed distant and out of touch, had become more involved in the daily lives of the town. He worked alongside Emily and the other residents, organizing volunteer days, and helping them come up with plans for future improvements. Emily's actions had sparked something bigger than she could have ever imagined. What began with a simple desire to make her streets cleaner had turned into a movement centered around kindness, community, and the importance of looking after the world around them. And now, Emily's role as the person who started it all was something she carried with grace, understanding that the real value wasn't in the recognition she had received, but in the lasting impact she had made. One afternoon, after a particularly successful community cleanup event, Emily sat down on the edge of the park, her broom resting against the bench beside her. She watched as families gathered, children played, and people sat on the benches, enjoying the beauty of their revitalized town. It felt like a dream, this quiet, peaceful town that now seemed so full of life. As she sat there, a voice broke through her thoughts. It was the mayor, who had come over to sit next to her, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he began, "I don't think I ever really understood the power of small acts, but now, I see it. What you've done here, Emily, it's something that's going to keep growing. You've shown all of us that it's not about waiting for someone else to make things better. It's about stepping up and doing what you can, no matter how small it seems." Emily smiled at him, her eyes bright with gratitude. "I never thought it would turn into something like this," she said, looking around at the lively park. "I just wanted to make things better for me, for my family, for the people who live here, but I never imagined that everyone would come together like this." The mayor chuckled. "You started something bigger than you realized. You've made this town a better place, Emily, and I'm proud to have seen it happen." Emily nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. The mayor's words meant a lot to her, but it was the smiles of the people around her, the ones who had come to help, the ones who now took pride in their town, that truly made her heart swell with pride. As the day wore on, Emily found herself feeling at peace. The work was still ongoing. There was always something to improve, some corner to clean, some little way to make the world a better place, but the town had changed. It was no longer the place where people rushed by without noticing. Now, it was a place where people cared for each other and the environment they shared. Emily knew that this was the kind of change that would last, and just as she had once set out to clean the streets with a broom, Emily now realized that she had done much more than that. She had swept away the apathy, the neglect and the indifference that had once clouded her town's heart. She had swept in kindness, unity and a renewed sense of pride. The future seemed bright, and Emily knew that her journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The metal around her neck glimmered in the fading sunlight as she stood up and walked toward the park's entrance, her broom in hand. There was still more work to be done, more people to inspire, and more streets to clean. But for the first time, Emily felt like she wasn't just sweeping away dirt, she was sweeping in hope, and that was a job she would keep doing, no matter how big or small the task seemed.